Okay, so the cerebral cortex of the cerebrum is composed of gray matter, which contains billions of neurons. It has gyri, those folds, the gyrosingular fissures, the slits between various sections of the cerebrum, and sulci is the smaller gaps between the gyri. They can be identified on the cortex by looking at the surface of the cortex. Deep to the cortex is white matter composed of tracts of neurons that connect parts of the brain to each other and the spinal cord. A bundle of white matter tracts called the corpus callosum connects the right and the left hemispheres of the cerebrum. So here's the anatomical details of the cerebral cortex that we went over a little bit about earlier. So these are the gyri, the folds, these lumps. Between them, there are sulci. Sulcus is singular, sulci many, and if the gap is very deep, it's called a fissure. This is gray matter. This is white matter lighter. Okay. Here's the superior view of the cerebrum, anterior portion. This is the front. This is the longitudinal fissure separating the right and the left hemispheres of the cerebrum. And the cerebrum actually has some functional areas. They're called lobes of the cerebrum. And it can be divided into several lobes. There's going to be frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, and insula. And these lobes are easy to identify looking at some of the features of the brain, or actually looking at the cranial bones of the covering the cerebrum, because you can see they carry the same names as the cranial bones that cover the cerebrum. But easier it is to obviously look at a picture that has them colored, and this is a view of the cerebrum from the side. This is right lateral view, so from the right side, and here's cerebellum. So this is the back, this is the front. The first and the largest lobe of a cerebrum is the frontal lobe in the front. Next, after the frontal lobe, on the top of the head towards the back, so this is going to be like the kind of like the line marking the front and the back. So this is going to be parietal lobe in blue, occipital lobe in the very back, right above the cerebellum, occipital lobe. On the side, there's going to be temporal lobe, and a kind of like a hidden lobe, insulated lobe, is going to be insula. So basically, there's going to be a long fissure between the frontal and temporal lobe right here. It's called lateral cerebral sulcus. And if you actually open it up, like split it up, it splits up easily. And it's a little actual gap in here. There's going to be a lobe in there called insula. Okay. The gap between the cerebral cortex and the cerebellum right here is called transverse fissure. The deep sulcus between the parietal lobe and occipital lobe is called parieto-occipital sulcus, and the sulcus between the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe is called the central sulcus. Each lobe has specific functions localized to it. The frontal lobe is responsible for the intellect, thinking, reasoning, intuition, personality, mood, creativity, recall of memories, translation of words to thoughts, speech production, voluntary movement of muscle.